So the way it was run a little bit after, the way it was commented on after it happened, like the last few days, was a little bit, I thought, extreme, a little bit the sky is falling. I mean, obviously, it was shocking to see that ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court, and people were saying, there they go again. They're in Trump's pocket. The one reason I didn't think that they were in Trump's pocket on that particular suit, that they weren't just trying to make sure it came out Trump's way, was that Trump asked them to intervene and to dissolve that stay about 5 weeks before they did. If they had just wanted to put their, hand on the scale in this particular case, they would have ruled. They had the 6 votes. They would have ruled if they'd have had 6 votes to do this, but it looks like they might have. And that's why I think that they were doing it more on the merits of it, that it really wasn't right, because they could have taken it as soon as Trump filed it. They could have said, we're issuing an order right now dissolving that stay. They would have given Trump 5 weeks more head start to monkey around with the post office and to do what he's trying to do, which absolutely people have it right, that he's trying to rig the election. He's trying to not count votes. He's trying to hurt Democrats and hurt the vote against him. Okay, if I could just spend another minute on this.
Sure.
So what happens? So they've got 2 lawsuits, which also makes it complicated. And they're both up in the Boston area, both before the same judge, makes it even more complicated. But this judge, said that she thought it was ripe. So she issued an order that said 2 things, David. It said it was ripe, and it also said that it was on the merits improper, unconstitutional. Only the states have this kind of power. Trump is usurping wrongly the power that belongs solely to the states by trying to get the post office as this sort of federal whip to lash the states with and make the states do what he wants to do about the elections, when in fact it's up to the states. It's not up to him. It's not up to the post office. So she ruled all of that. It went to the Court of Appeals. They affirmed her. So they kept a stay in place, which meant the post office couldn't really gear up. DHS couldn't really gear up to do what I consider a monstrosity in violation of the Constitution. So it was backed up by the Court of Appeals. That's what I said. Trump went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and for 5 weeks they thought about it. They what are we going to do? What about this? And they said, you know what? It's not ripe. And the ripeness thing may sound like it's very abstruse, but the ripeness thing is about, there wasn't something published in the Register, the Federal Register. There wasn't a rule. And so the argument was, what is the court going to rule on when there's no rule? What are they going to tell them? Don't follow the rule. There is no rule. It was too inchoate. It was too in the making and not done enough. The 3 dissenters said, are you kidding? It is so clear which way this wind is blowing. What the post office is going to do is they're not going to send out a ballot to anybody who's not on some federally approved list. We know exactly what the post office is going to do. They may not have exactly done it yet, the 3 dissenters said on the Supreme Court. So the other thing that surprised people after they did that was then it went back to the district judge, and they said, oh my God, the district judge who ruled that this was all improper, unconstitutional on the merits, now she dissolved her order. Oh my God, is she persuaded by the Supreme Court's logic? The only logic of the Supreme Court decision was it wasn't ripe and she didn't have jurisdiction. So now she has an order in front of her that the Supreme Court says she has no jurisdiction over. So she removed the order which she had no jurisdiction over. That were the headlines. Oh my God, even the judge who ruled on the merits now is changing course. She's not changing course. And
but
so,
now that it is in the Federal Register, now it is ripe. And so with that, I want to play for you. Here's California Governor Newsom talking about how California, among other states, is not going to stand for this meddling. Here's Governor Newsom. This is clip number 1. Watch.
Over a year, Donald Trump is coming for your right to vote. And the Supreme Court, what more evidence do you need? Just cleared the way months before the election. California will sue. We're not going to let Trump disenfranchise Americans or rig the rules to his advantage. The Voting Rights Act is hanging now by a thread. This is how democracy gets dismantled. One right, one ruling, one election at a time. So the fight, it's here. It's now. The stakes are enormous. And it's time for all of us to recognize that we still have power. We need to show up, stand up, and vote this November.
So now that this Trump rule is in the register, that takes care of the ripeness issue. The states sue again. What happens? How do you see this playing out? How long does it take to wind its way again through the courts? Does it go right back up to the Supreme Court? Does it have to go through the district judge and the Court of Appeals?
You not only asked a great question, you asked a series of 4 great questions.
Sorry.
Let me see if I can deal with them seriatim, as the courts would say. The bottom line is that this will not affect the upcoming election. That's the bottom line. The Supreme Court took the 5 weeks that the Supreme Court took. Now this judge, Katz, we do this prediction on the show, David. Katz says that this will not affect this coming election because it's just too close. There's ballots that have to go out September 4th. There's ballots that have to go out to the military and the overseas voters in a couple of weeks. There's just no time left. So this judge, that Katz, is that she will issue the exact same order because the merits are exactly the same. The Postal Service did exactly what people feared and anticipated that they would do, which is really draconian. I mean, here's what they would do if this ever does become the law. They would not send out in the post, they wouldn't send out in the mail a ballot to you unless you were on a list that was approved by the federal government, that the Trump administration had received from each individual state, and a state that wouldn't turn over the information so that Trump could compile the list, they wouldn't get service at all. They would be discriminated against completely by the post office. But even the ones who did turn them over, there'd be a culling by the federal government. So this is really an abomination if it ever goes into effect. So she'll issue an order. I think it'll go back to the same 3-judge panel that already decided that it was fine on the merits and it was ripe. They'll say, okay, we were wrong, it was ripe, but it's screwed up on the merits. He's not allowed to do this under the merits, not allowed to do this under the Constitution. That will go back to the U.S. Supreme Court, no matter how expedited any of that is. And they can't really expedite her that much, and they can't expedite the Court of Appeals that much. The conservatives will say, they're just delaying things. All they want to do is delay. This is after all the years that Trump delayed his tax return. He went to the Supreme Court twice. That took 2.5 years to get his tax return. After he delayed the 2 prosecutions of him federally that I thought both of them were righteous, but he ran out the clock on both of those with a friendly Supreme Court majority helping him. But they'll scream. You watch and see. The conservatives will scream, oh, they're just running out the clock, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah, they're using lawfare. They're being so litigious to try to slow things down. And who has been the most litigious? There's a great graph that came through an Axios article that I want to have Albert put up on the screen. This talks about the media and defamation lawsuits, and this is just defamation involving Donald Trump. And here's the graph, and you see that red? That's Donald Trump. So this is a guy who lives and breathes with lawsuits and courts, and yet for Republicans and conservatives to say, oh, but now the courts are slowing things down, and they're messing with our election because they're not ruling on whether or not we can stop the mail-in ballots. Well, you know what? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if Donald Trump has his right to court and lawsuits as much as he has had, then certainly the legal system has its right to slowly and judiciously consider the legal battles that we're seeing here. There's another issue that I wanted to ask you about, David, which is fascinating, and that is this running battle over the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, and Donald Trump wanted his name on it, and I guess the commission and they said, yes, let's put it on, but you have to go through Congress. You have to get an act of Congress to change the name. And so there was a lawsuit about that. The lawsuit basically ruled in the favor of the plaintiffs. And so Donald Trump was required to have his name pulled back off of the Kennedy Center. Well, now Donald Trump is making another threat to the Kennedy Center. I want to get your reaction to this. This is how David Meir described it on ABC News. Watch. And this is cut number 2.
The administration is now threatening to demolish the Kennedy Center if it's not allowed to move forward with renovations and allowed to add President Trump's name to the front of the building. Justice Department lawyers arguing without the president's help, the, quote, decrepit venue would go into a, quote, death spiral. President Trump's name went up at the Kennedy Center in December. A judge then ordered it taken down. Tonight, the Trump administration is now
destroy the Kennedy Center, tear it down because it's decrepit. And if Donald Trump can't make the renovations that he wants, including putting his name up on it, then they'll just have to tear it down. Can they do that? I mean, I know they can. I guess they could just take a wrecking ball and do whatever they want, but that's not constitutional, is it? Don't they still have to follow what Congress said in the statute that had passed, I think, in Lyndon Johnson's presidency?
Well, that's certainly true. But, you know, a lot of the things that govern us are norms. And part of those norms are that a president will not want to act in a way which is so repulsive and obnoxious that everybody will say, don't bring your kids up to do anything like that. That president there is not an example of what you ought to be like, what you ought to do in life. He's an example of like an awful person, like the way we look at foreign leaders and say, oh my God, don't ever be as disgusting as that person. Well, Trump's gotten to that level and his approval rating is going in the toilet, and he just doesn't care. So let's assume he just doesn't care. Let's assume that if he doesn't get his name on it, he's willing to tear the whole thing down, right? You're losing the game. You just turn over this chessboard. You take your marbles and go home. If he has that attitude toward the John F. Kennedy Center, I imagine that will not endear him to a lot of Kennedy fans who actually vote Republican or have voted Republican in the past. It's really sort of an obnoxious, vile thing to do, to tarnish, not to burnish, but to tarnish the memory of John F. Kennedy, who's so revered. And he's revered by people who the Republicans think that they can maybe get their votes, right? So everything about this is crazy. But to answer your question, Congress doesn't really micromanage things, and courts don't really micromanage them. And so the argument goes like this, and I think it's totally specious, but the argument goes, the place is dilapidated, it's falling apart. There are these private donors who are willing to save it. They're only willing to save it if Donald Trump's name is on it in the ways that we want Donald Trump's name to be on it. And so, Judge, if you rule that Trump's name can't be on it at all until Congress acts, the donors will remove their support and the place is dilapidated and will fall down. And before it falls down on people's heads, we're just going to, we're going to do the construction on it, which you are absolutely right. They'll demolish it. They'll make it awful. They'll do every vile thing that they can do. Now, Congress could turn around if it weren't controlled by, Speaker Johnson and the Republicans in the Senate. They could turn around right now, right? And they could say, okay, it needs $200 million worth of repairs. Here, we're voting $200 million. So they absolutely have the power. I mean, only they can approve this allocation. But if they don't allocate the money because they play Trump's game, this is what he wants so bad. They don't allocate the money because they're in his pocket. He keeps telling this federal judge the place is dilapidated, it's about to fall down. David, you be the judge. What the hell are you going to do with that case if that's the record in front of you?
Well, I would go over to the Kennedy Center and realize it's actually not, sure, maybe there's some cracks and maybe there's some things that need to be improved. But until Donald Trump took office, they were still having regular performances in the Kennedy Center. And even once he did take office, they had a full schedule, a full concert series, National Symphony Orchestra, various performers who were going to perform in 2026. It was only once Donald Trump had his name put up that a lot of people said, wait a second, I don't want to be part of this. And people started pulling out. And then Donald Trump started making the claim that it was dilapidated. That's my son. Sorry. The dog is greeting my son. So, but
you suggested a solution, David. You suggested a solution that hadn't occurred to me. Maybe the judge could appoint a special master to report back promptly what is the actual condition of the place. And of course, under the judge's order, Trump couldn't prevent that. Trump has, I think, greater power over at the White House with that bunker, which is not a bunker or which is a second surplus bunker, and which really doesn't go to the issue of whether the ballroom should be, anything having to do with the ballroom should be constructed, even if there are some bunker things. But I think that the courts are more hands-off at sending a special master over to the White House, the president's residence as well as office. But he should have no compunctions, he or she, the federal judge in this case, sending a special master over there to see just how dilapidated it is. So my bet on this is that they don't demolish the JFK Center, that this is a threat, and that he will probably settle for any face-saving thing. Trump will probably go along with John F. Kennedy Center without his name, but there'll be a plaque on the side which says renovated by President Donald J. Trump. He'll take some face-saving thing like that, and that's probably where this one shakes out, because again, it's the terrible publicity he's getting on the arch, on the ballroom, on this. We've almost forgotten about the reflecting pool fiasco and the wrongly charged U.S. Olympian.
Well, one more question before we let you go, David, if we got the time. And that is, there's a lot of talk about Democrats taking control of the House and the Senate and discussions about impeachment and which articles of impeachment they would try to pass. If you were advising, based on whether it's the legal merits or even the politics, I suppose you could impeach Donald Trump for tearing apart the East Wing of the White House and building up this ballroom without congressional authority, or you could go after the corruption route. Which direction would you take it?
Wow. You know, I was working in the U.S. Attorney's Office at the same time as Adam Schiff, who I'm sure is thinking about this question, and it's going to have a lot more impact. Schiff's thinking than David Katz is thinking on it. And I thought that the one that they impeached Trump for, that Schiff handled the presentation of the case in the Senate, because remember they impeached him, but they didn't convict and remove him because they didn't have 2/3 of the vote in the Senate. It's really you and I, follow the news, so we know that there's an impeachable offense a day. There really is. I don't know. The two that you mentioned certainly seem good ones. The lining his pockets, the Qatari jet. That would seem like one of several. And I think it'll depend how strong witnesses they have. Especially if he loses the House, if he also loses the Senate. People will realize he's a lame duck who's violated so many laws and is so impeachable. Witnesses will start coming forward. Right now it's very hard to have witnesses come forward. At least the belief is that he'll sick the FBI on them. He'll sick Kash Patel on them wrongly. He'll sick that former Fox commentator Janine Pirro on them.
Well, there's also,
if you don't believe me, there's Comey. They were going to indict Schiff on absolutely garbage charges. Apparently they backed off of that, but Comey's under indictment. Bolton, you could say, well, he did at least plead guilty. I mean, all these people that David Katz says are being railroaded and are innocent. There was one guy who'd done something. He hadn't done much in the scheme of things. It was pretty clear that even Bolton, while there was a factual record that persuaded his lawyers to tell him, you better plead guilty, make the best of it. He was obviously targeted, Bolton. So people are really scared of being targeted. They're scared of being whistleblowers. This one last thing is Republicans that all said, this old 90-year-old Republican who says, he's so for whistleblowers. He seems to like whistleblowers when they blow the whistle on Democrats. He seems to have a total double standard when it comes to, what they haven't investigated is shocking. I mean, billions of dollars put in his pocket. Look what they investigated Biden and Biden's son for. And these same hypocrites turn around while Trump has put billions of dollars, and that's with a B, billions of dollars. And there are these pay-to-play pardons, which are a disgrace. So that would be another one. The fact that he can't be, that he has a pardon power doesn't mean that they can't impeach him for selling a pardon. And even if that presidential immunity case, that protects him from cases in court, but nothing about the presidential immunity case prevents the Senate from removing him or impeaching him. What constitutes an impeachable offense, David, is really up to the Senate judges when they vote on the articles of impeachment brought by the House.
Yeah, the House acts as like a grand jury, and the Senate is the jury, and they need 2/3 to convict. David Katz, a former federal prosecutor who served with Adam Schiff, who has been one of the senators who has listed some of the various corruption on the Senate floor, along with Connecticut Senator Murphy, who they've gone through the laundry list. And David is also a legal expert. And David, thanks so much for being on with me today. It was great to see you.